What's going on, guys? I just wanted to bring to you guys today my prediction that this weekend Tony Ferguson is going to beat his 7 fight losing streak. Okay, I know you think I'm crazy, I know you think I'm coping, but I think he has an easy path in defeating Chiesa by decision, right? And no one's talking about it, right? The whole game's going, Tony's washed, 7 losses in a row, but there's many reasons as to why. Not only is that 7 fight losing streak not as bad as people are saying, but why Michael Chiesa is nothing like the other 7 people that he just lost to, right? Michael Chiesa should be an easy layout for Tony Ferguson. I believe Dana White's giving him it on purpose as a free win, so the Saudis go fucking crazy, right? In 2020, I had Tony Ferguson as my second favourite lightweight of all time, right? Well, probably my favourite, right? But second best lightweight of all time, I should say. We had Khabib at the top after what Khabib had done up to 2020. Then I had Tony. Then I had Benson Henderson, just on title defenses, right? Nowadays, where is Tony? Probably top 10 still, right? But definitely not top 5. I don't think. Islam's taken over him. Charles has taken over him. Hot take maybe, but DP's taken over him. Poirier's up there for sure, you know? So with Tony's win streak leading up to 2020, it's obviously been a huge shock that he's gone from the longest win streak in the division's history to the longest losing streak in the division's history, right? He's going to have the longest losing streak in the whole sport if he loses this weekend. I'm pretty sure he's tied with Penn right now at 7. And I mean, I don't want to live in a world where we have Bilal Muhammad is the champion 1 week, and then the next week Tony Ferguson has the longest losing streak in the history of the sport, right? That's a world I'm not comfortable living in, honestly. And sure, maybe I've made a whole PowerPoint and coping about this right now, but I think I have some important points, So let's look at his losses, right? 2020, Justin Gaethje, that loss was brutal, right? But I don't have a cope for that loss. I will say I had it as 2-2 going into the 5th. I'm not sure what people had, but that's just I rewatched it recently. I had it going 2-2 into the 5th, right? Which at the time, I remember Tony thinking that Tony's getting absolutely butchered out there. But it was closer than you think. It's just obviously that 5th round was fucking horrible, right? But you nearly finished. You would have finished Gaethje. He had that buzzer beater uppercut. Gaethje was flatlined. Tony could have finished him. But anyway, let's not yap about that. Justin Gaethje loss. That Gaethje loss was, an acceptable loss. Prime Charles. Again, I'm not going to talk too much into it. An acceptable loss. But Tony Ferguson was still Tony Ferguson. He had that durability about him. Didn't tap to that armbar. Blood's still a beast, Prime Benil's where it gets a little bit iffy. I mean, at the start of 2023, you had people, Bedtime MMA, saying that Benil Dariush was going to be Islam Makhachev, So if we're looking at Prime Benil Dariush, highly rated and highly skilled, okay? But this is where obviously the decline does start. The Chandler KO was absolutely brutal, absolutely heartbreaking. But round 1, he dropped him. And he dropped him, I wouldn't say he dropped him bad actually, but he dropped him, clean on the chin. And Tony won that first round, obviously. So is that fluke? I wouldn't call it fluke KO. I know I've done it, but for dramatic effect, it was that front kick up the middle, right? I mean, Chandler himself said that he just felt like throwing it. It wasn't something he necessarily practiced. He just felt like kicking him in the face. So I mean, I don't know. Maybe Michael Chandler does have godly fight IQ, but from what I've seen, I don't want to agree with that idea. But no. So sure, we'll call it a fluke KO for the sake of me coping about this loss, right? Now we're 4 losses in a row, and we get to Nate Diaz on 1 day's notice, right? That fight was so unserious, bro. Why the fuck does that even count as a loss? Honestly, Really, Nate Diaz was turning around and like walking off, and Tony wasn't even chasing him. Tony did not want the finish in that fight. Tony wanted Nate to have his, sail off into the sunset ending. And again, call it cope, but I don't think he had a desire to win that fight, right? I still think he did in these prior ones, the Chandler one, the Dariush, the Oliveira, and I think all the other ones. But I think in this Diaz fight, Tony just didn't really care. I mean, neither of them did, right? It was probably one of the worst fights of all time. But yeah, Nate had a nice little retirement fight, so I mean, we can't really blame Tony. It was a pretty wholesome fight, right? King Green, here's where it gets really bad, right? But again, Tony did drop him, and nearly survived all 3 rounds. He only got choked out with 6 seconds to go at the end of that fight. Was it a close fight? No, not really. I think Bobby Green won quite easily, if it did go to a decision. Obviously it didn't, but had it gone, same problem. But either way, it's not like this guy's getting, Dominic Reyes chinned in about 5 seconds by a jab, So in no way is Tony chinny or hasn't got the cardio, or, you know what I mean? It's bad, but it's not as bad as people are saying. I really stand by that too. I know he does have the longest losing streak in the whole sport, but I genuinely think there are other fighters on worse skids right now than Tony Ferguson. The Paddy fight, not only is it aging well, seeing what he just did to Bobby Green last weekend, right? But he went 3 rounds. He didn't get caught up or submitted on the ground. He didn't get chinned on the feet. Paddy has a fucking granite chin, so Tony had no way of KOing him. He had no way of subbing him because Paddy's BJJ is unreal, right? And what's he going to do? Outpoint Paddy Pimblett? The guy's nearly turning 40, right? And Paddy Pimblett is not Michael Chiesa, and Michael Chiesa is not that guy, okay? He's not him, okay? Look at his last 3 losses. Got wrapped up like a pretzel against Holland in that Darce choke. Sean Brady walked him down. And Luque, I mean, we're looking at a pretty good Luque, right? That's not a bad loss. That's a pretty prime Luque. Well, maybe slightly past prime. But, round 1 sub in his last 3 losses. It's looking hopeful for Tony. I mean, do I see Tony getting the sub? No. I mean, obviously it's more likely than the KO, but I do see it being a decision. But if Tony can, wrap him up or even pose a submission threat, that might make Chiesa respect his thing on the ground, And then maybe Chiesa doesn't shoot as much because he doesn't want to get caught with a Darce choke, like he has done in the last fucking 3 of his losses, I mean, we got wins over Magny and Dos Anjos here, but that's like a welterweight rite of passage, right? So, I don't know. And I mean, again, they're nearly 4 years ago. Chiesa lacks the dog in the fight. Chiesa looks fragile. He looks like you can push him about. He looks like he doesn't want to be there a lot of the time. No urgency, no sense of violence. Bro's not out for blood. Tony Ferguson in his prime was out for blood, right? He would, when you see a man, he looked absolutely crazy, right? Tony Ferguson, he'd be fucking spinning elbows. Holy shit, bro was a dog, right? And I get he's 40 now, I get he's out of his prime, but that dog has to stay in you. It does stay in you. Look at the way he talks. Tony's not threatened by Chiesa. Tony's not threatened by Chiesa at all. Tony says he saw fear in Chiesa, and that leads on to the Fight Week interview in which he said that, right? I mean, every Tony Ferguson interview, I will admit, he does go, oh no, my last fight I felt awful, but this fight I feel great. And then he goes on and loses anyway, right? Or, get unnecessarily angry at reporters and stuff, and Dana White privilege and blah, 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 right? But I mean, he's moving up to 170. When he did that last time, people were like, oh God, this is a cope, Oh, maybe I'm not washed. Maybe I'm just depleting my body. But either way, I understand people hated on him the first time when he moved up to fight Leach at 170. Saying, bro, just retire. But if you think about it, that was only after And I would say only after 5 straight losses, but it keeps getting worse, guys. All right, so we need to win eventually for Tony here. Okay, back up to 170. He's gonna have more power. His cardio is gonna last longer. He's gonna hopefully be more explosive, more durable, have more endurance, have more grip to him. He won't feel as weak. He won't be as, soy, low testosterone for a 40-year-old man. I mean, he's not doing no David Goggins. They don't know me, son. Who's going to carry the boats in my corner? Let's do 4 hours of cardio and throw up in a bucket for no reason. Like, that was low-key torture for Tony. Like, I understand his cardio was already good. So, 4 hours with David Goggins is a lot easier for him than it is for me. But, this is still a 40-year-old Tony Ferguson. Overloading yourself with cardio during fight camp is suboptimal. It's never been a strategy of any fighter. It just makes no sense. You want to feel strong, you want to spar, you want to feel sharp. Tony hasn't been sparring for years. Just hasn't been sparring. And I think it's this raging sense of narcissism and his ego. And I would too if I had a 12-fight winning streak and then I lost to 3 of the best lightweights of this era in their prime, in Gaethje, Charles and Benil. And then the KO to Chandler, which, that's the sport, I guess. And then the Diaz one, and he'll go, if I'm coping for him, imagine how he's coping for himself, The Diaz one, he probably let Diaz have that one. Bobby Green, yeah, did alright though. Paddy Pimblett, did alright though, So, that sense of ego creates such a drive in you. It must do, right? Bro should have retired 4 fights ago and he's still here. And I think a lot of people are getting disheartened by that. But that's actually looking good for me. I'm seeing that as a good thing, right? And it has to pay off eventually. If he's saying he's doing an hour and a half of cardio and 20 rounds of sparring, and he's saying, no, I see fear in Chiesa, I'm going to outpoint you, I'm going to outwork you. That makes me feel good because he knows what he's going for. He's going for that decision. He's going to outpoint and outwork. He's been doing cardio. He's ready for the wrestling. He says he feels healthy, right? He's ticking all the boxes here, right? And like I said, Paddy Pimblett, Bobby Green, Michael Chandler, Michael Chiesa is none of those guys, right? Michael Chiesa is a washed, small welterweight. Is he a small welterweight? No, he's a soy welterweight. He's fragile, he looks flimsy, he looks weak, right? And, Chiesa likes his Darce choke, even though he just got choked out by a Darce choke. Tony has a good little Darce choke as well. So, I don't know. If it goes to a submission, my money's on a Darce choke, right? But I don't see that happening. These guys are fucking weak old men. I do think Tony has a striking advantage, right? No one's going to say that, but I think he's going to have the sharper punches, and I think he's going to be unorthodox, and I think he's going to throw weird shit, and I think Chiesa is not used to that at all. He's fighting Luque, he's fighting Brady, He's fighting, Neil Magny. These guys are like the NPCs of the welterweight division. I think the skill sets cancel each other out. I don't think Tony will have an issue stopping Chiesa on the ground. I think any offense Chiesa has, I'm hoping Tony's just going to feel stronger and bigger and be able to get up off his feet, or maybe even work on the bottom. We've seen Tony work on the bottom quite easily, throwing elbows, threatening submissions. And so when you have these skill sets that cancel each other out, people are looking to the external factors, right? And the external factors everyone else is looking for is, oh, well, Chiesa's on a 3-fight losing streak, Tony's on a 7. So Chiesa's better. Or less shit, I guess, right? But I'm looking for who wants it more, who has the drive, who's healthier, who has the durability, and who has the need to prove themselves, right? And I just think it's Tony, man. I think he has nothing to lose. I think he has nothing to lose, and I can't see a world in which the guy that was once considered the second best lightweight of all time, and people that were considering this is the guy to beat Khabib, I don't see him 4 years later losing to Michael Chiesa. I don't. I understand Chiesa's low-key not that bad. He has quite a good resume. But I think Chiesa's washed. I think Tony's washed. But I think Tony has to get it done eventually, right? I mean, if he goes to an 8-fight losing streak, I don't even want to imagine that well. Tony's going to get it done, right? He has nothing to lose. There's no spotlight. It's not a big pay-per-view card. It's a very big fight night card, to be fair, but it's not a big pay-per-view card, right? It's out in Abu Dhabi. Chiesa hasn't necessarily got a, home crowd advantage or anything. The media obligations are nowhere near as much. No presser, blah, blah, blah. I'm hoping he's just locked in and ready to fight. And trust me, Chiesa will not be the man to retire Tony Ferguson, okay? You can mark my words on that. All right, I love you guys. Thank you. Take care.